Immunotherapy was considered quackery. We would have never bought CHIPSA if we believed the mainstream, but we knew they were full of shit. We are being lied to about a lot of different things.
Immunotherapy for cancer is a game changer for hundreds of thousands of people, period. Millions of people if you extrapolate this over decades. All of those people end up living, or presumably the people that live will live as a response to that treatment. People just don't typically, in my experience, rant and rave about their experience at a hospital. But they always rant and rave about their experience at our hospital. Everything down from the people, the food. I believe that that contributes to some of the health outcomes because there's a positive attitude or a positive experience associated with coming and receiving treatment, healing, and care. We have figured out a way to provide a service model that leaves people feeling good about being in a hospital, and that's a game changer.
Over 9 years ago, we bought the hospital in Mexico together. Looking back on the entire project, what is the biggest lesson you've learned?
The biggest lesson that I've learned over the last 9 years since we've acquired a hospital in Mexico is be very, 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 very unbelievably, if I think that there is a way that my mind can be closed, I need to think again. Be very open-minded, be very open to how things can be done, not sabotage success by asking how too early, and be aware that the what is ever changing. A friend of ours would say a moving target, and be very, very open to these things. Be very open-minded. I think before this, I thought that business success had to look a certain way and follow a certain sequence of steps. And this has taught me that that is absolutely not the case. And if I apply that to other areas of my life, other business ventures, relationships, and just being very open and accepting of what we are doing, and very, very even more open and accepting of how it can be done, then great things can happen.
What's been the biggest surprise for you over the last 9 years of owning a hospital?
The biggest surprise for me would be how different the outcomes can be if the service model is different, if that makes sense.
Outcomes and what type
And health
of
outcomes.
Okay.
The patient outcomes. I think the biggest eye-opener for me is how well received our former patients are and how they speak about us, how they talk about their experience at the hospital, everything down from the people, the food. People just don't typically, in my experience, rant and rave about their experience at a hospital. But they always rant and rave about their experience at our hospital.
Yeah.
And I believe that that contributes to some of the health outcomes because there's a positive attitude or a positive experience associated with coming and receiving treatment, healing, and care that you just aren't going to get. Maybe different organizations don't take the time, or maybe they're just ineffective at what they're trying to do. But somehow we have figured out a way to provide a service model that leaves people feeling good about being in a hospital, and that's a game changer.
What do you think it is that we do different that makes people feel good, even if they're not getting, let's say, a result? You know, with stage 4 cancer, someone could not respond to our treatment, but generally they leave very happy. Why is that?
I think that we do an effective job very early on of not allowing people to lay in victimhood and feel victimized by their disease or their situation. Or if they're caring for someone and what's going on with being a supporter for someone who is experiencing the disease, we do a good job of at least calling attention to that. Now, individually, what you would like to do with that is, of course, on you. But I think we do a good job in calling attention to that in a way that most organizations of any kind would not address victimhood. When people, emotionally, we want to say that, oh, we kind of feel sorry for someone because they're going through this, and that may be true, but maybe that isn't what they need right now, right? And maybe that feeling sorry can maybe contribute to people feeling like a victim of this when what they need is to be empowered because they have a long journey to fight this disease. Right. And we do a good job literally day one, when you arrive at the hospital, of beginning to chip away at that, shine a light on it, call attention to it, because in life, with things that occur, they're going to keep occurring.
Mhm.
And victimhood is the most demobilizing thing that a person can do with a long journey ahead of them. I couldn't even imagine looking to climb a mountain that seems insurmountable and feeling like a victim at the base of the mountain. We'll never get to the top.
Right.
Right? We're never going to make it. So helping
That's right.
people overcome that, even it seems small,
Mhm.
but I think that is actually huge, and why people are like, well, maybe I should think about this a little bit differently or approach this differently, and take some more ownership of what the outcome could be.
Absolutely.
And again, opening our minds to how this could look might not be what you thought when you first got here. And maybe being a victim isn't going to get you where you thought it could be, whether you're intentionally or unintentionally doing that. I think our ability to speak to that is a big differentiator for us.
How do you think that translates into life and other businesses?
Oh, for me at least, I had never really been a part of a business that addressed mindset directly to the customers, where that was not the business itself, right? Like,
Right.
you've got speakers and things like this who that's their business is providing that service to the guests. But I had never been a part of a business where that was not the core thing that they were offering that addressed it and spoke to it. So that in and of itself, like, imagine if restaurants or other businesses where you wouldn't expect this type of empowerment actually provided that as a part of the service that you were getting.
Right.
How much different would your experience be? How would you look at that organization, the owners of that business? Perhaps if things weren't going well for you, would you not personalize that and say, hey, these owners are people too? Because they took the time to address something that most people are going to overlook. And I think that plays a lot into, my growth in this is I'll never have another business where I don't address this with people, my customers, directly, period.
Right.
Because I see how they respond, because we're not perfect, because I took the time to help them or assist them in that way.
Right.
So it's always now ingrained in me in different areas of my life to like, hey, be mindful of this.
Yeah.
And even in real estate and things like this, I have one-on-one conversations with tenants, and we talk about empowerment. We talk about, hey, you may be in an affordable housing program, but the goal is homeownership, right? You're not supposed to sit here in poverty. I'm going to give you a chance to buy this house if you like it, right? You can't be a victim and expect to just reap the minimum of society and propel. It's just not going to work that way.
Right.
Now, I'm going to have this conversation with you, but it's on you to take action.
Yeah.
Right? And we see that in the participation rates of people who are in that one business, that one venture, and taking what I learned in this hospital environment, and I see it. I'm like, you come in, you're getting a voucher, okay, you're getting assistance, and to a certain degree, you feel like a victim, and you don't really feel like progressing more because you're receiving some sort of benefit from this victimhood, and it just doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I don't think we could operate our business in Mexico if we didn't set the expectation and the standard of what we expect, where we expect the patient to come from. And what I mean by that is, we are going to make mistakes. It's healthcare. They might not get the outcome that they want. I think a lot of times people's go-to, with that is, oh, well, you didn't do X, Y, and Z. And we, as you know, put it all on the table and say, this is what it is. This is what it isn't. It's easy to become a victim to this treatment didn't work.
Right.
And if you can see that, that we're laying it all out right now.
Right.
If you want to start working on your mindset and working on being personally responsible and empowering yourself to get through this, we want to stand with you. But, we don't allow our staff to take abuse, so either. It's interesting, that this is what you brought up because, we have probably the most loving staff, but different than a lot of companies. If a patient is being absurd, we put them in their place too. So it's like it's weird because we treat people with the respect we expect to be treated with.
Yes.
And we let them know what that is up front.
Right.
So when someone, let's say, is getting out of line, we acknowledge it in a fine way, but we deal with it. And the personal responsibility from us and them it can only make everybody better because the experience is better for the whole group. And cancer, emotional cancer spreads like cancer. How many times have you heard, like, have we got, let's say you get a complaint from a patient that you never get before, and all of a sudden 4 patients are bringing it up. You're like, oh, there's something there. They're talking about something there. It's interesting how that works. But when you get everybody aligned,
right,
and what is the vision of the treatment for everybody?
Right.
I mean, when it's flowing, man, it's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Effective communication is like a contract, right? And when we thoroughly go through this informed consent of not just what you should expect from treatment, but what you should expect from us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we can always reference back that agreement.
Right.
And say, no. We never said this, or we never said that.
Yeah.
Right? We're very clear with those expectations of not just the treatments, the people, the care, what we expect from you. Right? A lot of times people don't have any expectations placed on them at all when they're receiving service other than to receive it and shut up.
Right.
And that's not how we operate.
No.
You know, if you look at the traditional healthcare model, patients are confined to their rooms almost 23 hours a day or longer, maybe perhaps 24 hours a day. That sounds like prison, right? That sounds like we're going to put you in a room. You're going to be checked on periodically by people who, you know, perhaps are overworked. They're going to spend a minimal amount of time with you. Yes, they care. Yes, they love their job. Yes, they're committed. But the nature of the business model doesn't allow for the same amount of personal time. Let's get to know you. Remember our contract. When you start having those days, remember what we talked about.
Right.
That, you know, the fact that we can even reference that and we can, you know, gently or firmly, whatever is needed, reference and place a person back on track.
Yes.
Right? Because that's the ultimate goal is we want to get you back on track because the way you're thinking right now, you're not on track.
Right.
Right? The direction is over here and you're worried about the wrong shit.
Right.
We need to be back on track.
That's it.
So that is something that we do very well.
Yeah.
You know, I look to emulate that in other things and other areas of my life, not just business, but with people. Is like have these conversations on the front end. Like, let's be very clear what the expectations are. You know, what do I expect from you? Whether this be a friendship, some sort of romantic relationship, whatever. Let's have that conversation up front and be clear. And if we need to renegotiate, let's be clear that we are renegotiating those terms.
Right.
It's not, you don't have just agency, you know, it's called boundaries, right? Like so that has been you know, I've known this my whole life. And I think subconsciously, because of maybe how I was raised, I lived this way to just, be clear with people, be direct with people. You know, I've always intuitively done this, but prior to this business venture, I had never systemically applied these principles as part of the operation.
Yeah.
Like every customer has to go through this point so we could set their expectations now and see the outcome of how much smoother everything runs. I mean, I was there before we were really addressing this.
Oh gosh. Do you remember what the catalyst was?
Yes. We had, you guys had left. I maybe had come back on like we had been working almost every day since the hospital reopened. And there were, I don't remember how many people had come in. And we thought, okay, we kind of got this thing. Let's just it might have been a week. Maybe not even a week.
Oh yeah, it was a 4-day Utah health seminar that Scotty and I went to.
Right. So, you know, I come into the hospital and there's just this big uprising, and there's this couple that they're flipping out, like they're wilding out. They're causing what amounts to an insurrection inside of our organization. They're trying to get patients to leave, all because they didn't receive their weekly calendar.
Right.
And I said, this is the chaos of misalignment when people aren't put on track early on, their expectations not set.
Right.
But then the moment that we did it, the moment that we were like, let's just get some sort of effective orientation in place. I have never really seen one thing be implemented in a business that's had that much dramatic change.
Yeah.
Other than like that was just like immediate, like, oh wow, okay, this makes the business 50 times easier to run now.
Right.
Right. Just by setting that clear expectation on the front end. So I remember that. I remember what it was like before this. And I think those that have been, we talked a little bit before we started recording about all of the different evolutions that we've gone through as owners. I think even before that day, before the first orientation, that business was gone and a new business was birthed that first orientation. In many ways, that was also created a new business because it created a brand new customer experience and an opportunity. So
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I remember the first orientation. I gave the orientation, made a PowerPoint, and the first thing that I said is, if anybody promised that you're going to put an IV in your arm and your cancer is going to be magically cured, raise your hand.
Right.
And we will write you a refund check.
Right.
And knowing that nobody ever said that. But, you know, a lot of it was giving them an orientation, acknowledging the objections that they might say that we said. Right. And saying, you know, this isn't true. Every objection that we could think of, we would go over just to make sure they're clear. Because, you know, people that they're going through a tough time, they might, you know, they have cancer. Emotionally, they're going through a lot, and sometimes they just forgot too. You know, it's like, let's get it all straight. Do we all have, you know, the same understanding in a group? So everybody can see it together. Like, we're not hiding anything. So that way, if someone in the group said, "Well, this person said this, this, and that," it's like, no, you know,
at orientation,
we went over this in great detail, and then, you know, I think it was building the classes, right? Do you remember when we started building the classes? What was the first class you could remember we did?
So one of the first ones that we did was Your Treatments Explained. Besides the Power of the Mind was a class and orientation. The Treatments Explained was actually, I thought, ingenious because, you know, the patients coming in a medical tourism environment have all day, right? And if you don't speak the language, you know, there might not be abundance of TV options. Like, you really don't have a lot to do. And we just doubled down on education. And the Treatments Explained was cool because it allowed patients in kind of a classroom setting to ask general health questions to a doctor, right? In a way that maybe they wouldn't have felt comfortable with their own oncologist or primary care provider. They could just ask these questions. Well, how does this drug work? Or how does that drug work? Obviously, individual situations are what they are, but in general, what are the mechanisms? What should I expect in general? And I think that did wonders for helping people understand and have a better understanding. Life is a long road. And sometimes just knowing the questions to ask and having a good basis of information to ask the right questions can get you the best outcome. And I think that class, along with others, nutrition classes, the cooking classes with Manny, I mean, they help arm the patients for conversations that they would have about their situation or their disease when they were talking to other people and not feel so victimized with ignorance, right? You're now armed with enough information to ask a good question and get a different perspective, right? Which is what you want, right? You're getting a second opinion. You get a third opinion from a doctor because you want a different perspective, not because you want everyone to sing the same song. Right. Unless that song is "You're Cancer Free," then in which case, yes, we're celebrating, but you want a different perspective about treatment. But if you don't even really know the questions to ask, or you aren't even confident enough or empowered enough to ask questions, you know, you're going to get more of the same, right? Absolutely. So I think that was a big one outcome-wise. And we kind of heard it a little bit in aftercare when we're following up with patients. And you could tell that they're going back home and like trying it, right? They're trying it with their doctors. They're trying it with their providers. And, you know, everybody doesn't like to be questioned. Everybody doesn't like certain direct questions. So, you know, even hearing that, oh, so-and-so's doctor, you know, it could sound like a pushback when you're used to just kind of spewing information. And if someone unfortunately had a provider like that, you know, if you walk into their office one day, you've got a list of questions and, you know, maybe they didn't read your file or maybe they didn't read it as thoroughly and they had planned on coming in and, you know, spending 11 and a half minutes with you, you know, just kind of running through a checklist and sliding on and billing your insurance. but you stop them and you start asking questions.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, what? Who told you that? Who taught you to ask that? So that gave people the ammunition and the armor to take more control over their lives, to not feel like they're being kind of tossed to and fro by the healthcare system, asking questions. I think it got a lot of respect from those providers who do care, right? Because, this person has actually taken an interest in their own health as opposed to coming in and expecting to receive a pill. They're asking questions about nutrition. They're asking questions about lifestyle. And whether the physician agrees with one position or not, they now are, speaking directly to something that's of interest to the patient that maybe they wouldn't have even, in that 11.5-minute or 12-minute exchange, they would have never talked about. So that's huge.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking about questions they would bring in.
Yeah.
And, one that we always encourage people to ask their oncologist back at home was, is this treatment palliative or curative?
Right.
And a lot of times people didn't know, but chemotherapy for metastatic cancer, if it's not testicular cancer, pretty much is always palliative. It's actually always palliative. I might be off on even lymphoma is still, that's not stage 4, still palliative. The immunotherapies are curative now. But, for the longest time, the patients were thinking the doctors were giving them this chemo with their metastatic cancer and they could still be cured.
Right. Yeah. No.
It doesn't happen.
Nope.
And so that was always a fun one to ask.
Right.
Now, we've seen a change in cancer treatment over the years.
Yeah.
Because you figure, 2015, immunotherapies weren't very popular. I mean, some of the checkpoint inhibitors had just been passed, but the doctors, we brought in an oncologist from MD Anderson, and he was very dead. He's like, they're not going to work. And you remember that?
Yeah.
And I liked the guy, but he was just wrong about that.
Yeah.
But, we really saw a change from, let's say, 2015 when we purchased the hospital to 2019, 2018 when the immunotherapy started getting used a lot. What do you think that change caused within our organization?
Okay. The mainstreaming of immunotherapy, first of all, is a win for everybody.
Yep.
Right. Big picture, a win for everybody. What changed inside of our organization because of that is, organizations aren't people, but let's just hypothetically say our organization was a person. Nobody likes the "I told you so" guy, right? But there is some quantity to being right all along about something, right? And so walking that balance as an organization was saying, hey, what we were doing, even in the legacy ownership of the business before us, what they were doing and attempting to do was an immunological response. And what we are doing is an immunological response using a combination therapy. How do we embrace mainstream science, which for decades said that this was everything from ineffective to outright quackery, now embracing it as mainstream therapy when we've been doing it the entire time? How, as an organization, do we receive that now that there's an awakening and not be the "I told you so" and be, the response that we had was, let's take it to the next level. Let's focus on even more, if it means for the next 30 years, we get to be ahead of the curve like we were for the last 30 before science wakes up to this reality, then so be it, right? There is a place for people to come and they can receive these things and they know that there are thinking people who are supportive and open-minded to how we can arrive at a destination and what that destination could be. So the mainstreaming is a blessing. We didn't tell you so, but we were doing it for a long time. We were doing it. So I think that centers like TAM now have more of a foothold in immunology because it is newer, even though much of it is based on relatively old science. It is newer to the marketplace, and it's probably more effective for a smaller institution to be able to be a pioneer as opposed to a space where if we wanted to, for example, change the marketplace of chemotherapy, that would have been almost impossible, right? But immunology was so open and so broad that, you know, there's a lane for different types of thoughts and thinking, and it's not just cancer. Immunology affects so many different diseases that the research and the science that we start over here could have significant implication over here, which could have even more over here. And that was just really hard to do in kind of like the legacy model of cancer treatment where, you know, it's chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. That's it. Those are your options. And that made it, you know, the gods forever be in your favor or whatever. Like, you didn't really have a lot of room to play with in that space.
I mean, can you imagine, Deddrick, when you really look back at the history of cancer therapy from the late 1940s up until 2013, pretty much the only options were chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And if you had metastatic disease with a solid tumor, it was never curative. I mean, occasionally something crazy would happen, but the oncologist labeled it palliative therapy.
Right.
Like this is not curative therapy. We're trying to extend your life. Why do you think we went so long with that mindset?
You know, I think that there's like a convergence of factors that play into why, as a society, we will hold on to, you know, therapies that maybe aren't as effective as newer technology is. You know, some low-hanging fruit to think about are like economic interests. You know, drugs being sold for one purpose that would not be sold under another approach that impacts somebody's bottom line, period.
Yeah.
So there's that. Second is, you know, not insidious, but people get set in our ways, right? I think all of us do. And, you know, if you have been trained, educated, you've seen good and bad results as a physician or provider using a particular method that is known. Perhaps you might be of the thinking that what is known is better than what perhaps is not known or what is not as well known. And I think that there was a lot of weight given to the thousands and millions of cases that had used the legacy system, regardless of what those outcomes were, it's known, right? As opposed to going with the unknown, which, you know, for many people intellectually, that's frightening. I think that's another variable. I also think that some of the leaders, you know, of cutting edge technology aren't always the most popular people in the circles that push ideas forward.
Yeah.
Right. And there's some personality associated with that as well that I think allows for, like, you know, decades and decades and decades. It's like perhaps most reasonable scientists would be open-minded to another approach, but maybe wouldn't go on the record or stake their career behind it because of, oh man, this is going to hurt people's pockets. Now you got all these doctors that say, no, what about this? And then you got these weirdos over here. Like, what do you know, how can you, until it becomes mainstream, right? Until it's cool and accepted, you know, science I've seen to a certain degree kind of has a little bit of a bandwagon element to it. Until something reaches a certain tipping point, it's really hard for other thinkers to want to throw their hat behind it.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand the need for intelligent criticism, but, you know, immunology itself isn't new, right? And immunology with cancer isn't new. And there's been data and there's been cases. And regardless of how much more effective we think immunology is, it deserved a broader conversation for a longer period of time than just 2013, 2014, in the last 10 or 15 years. It has deserved that. And for us to just be arriving here, you know, better late than never, right? The proverb is the best time to plant a tree was 1,000 years ago. Second best time is right now. So here we are.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because, like, Franco Marincola, who's on our scientific advisory board, he was chief of infectious disease and immunogenetics for the National Institutes of Health. You know, he said, you know, what I used to do just 15 years ago wasn't considered real science. And it's unbelievable to think about because, you know, immunotherapy was considered quackery for, I mean, just up until really 2013-ish. And it really hit mainstream, and the oncologists started to believe it in 2018. That's when you saw, that's when we saw the big change in our hospital. And, you know, it makes you look, it makes me look at everything.
Right.
Like, what are we being told? And I look at, because imagine this, Deddrick. Imagine we would have bought Chipsa. And, well, we would have never bought it if we believed the mainstream.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't, we wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
There's no way. But we knew they were full of shit.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Yeah. They're lying about this stuff not working. There is data.
Right.
You know, they say the data says this, but, you know, we have papers and data that say just the opposite.
Right.
You know, you dig into the history of William Coley from 1891 to 1936. The father of immunotherapy in the textbooks today had a higher success rate treating many cancers than we do today. This is with his monologues.
That's right.
So his daughter, Helen Coley Knotts, founded the Cancer Research Institute in 1952 off of his work.
Right.
And for years, they said it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit.
Right.
And look at it now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, taking a step back and looking at the history and the timeline, which I have done many times over the years, is, you know, I think to myself, is there something that I'm not seeing? Is there something that I'm overlooking? Because again, I'm not suggesting that for the past 40 to 80 years, we should have just switched to immunology. I don't know if that would have been the appropriate thing to do. But what should have happened would have been a more open-minded approach by the medical and scientific community to embrace these ideas earlier.
Yeah. So
that we could be further along at this point.
Right.
I think many of the people who are champions, like you talk about Dr. Maricola, he knew at some point that immunology would have its day in the sun. The question is when. But the earlier we start, the sooner that day happens, the faster these therapeutics make it to the marketplace, the more lives we can save.
Yes.
Right? That time is money, right? That time is, you know, we can sit here and talk about this, but someone whose family is dealing with cancer and they do not have access to the treatments that they need, they don't have time for mainstream science to catch up. They don't have time for America to get itself together and debate all of these topics and all the journal articles. That is important. That's unbelievably important. But what if those things already existed?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And they existed.
And they existed.
They definitely existed. I mean, when I look at it, you know, I scratch my head because I'll hear Franco, you know, tell me stories about in the 1980s at NIH. You know, he's working with Steve Rosenberg. Steve Rosenberg is the biggest pioneer in immunotherapy at the National Cancer Institute. Ton of respect for him. If it weren't for Steve Rosenberg, I don't think that we would have a lot of what we have today. But, you know, he told me the first patient was a melanoma patient they treated with IL-2. And the very first patient got really sick, but they cured the cancer. And he's like, we found a cure for cancer. Oh my gosh, we found a cure. And the next 9 died from the cancer or the treatment combination. IL-2 is very toxic.
Yes.
And for those listening, IL-2 is an immunotherapy. And but he said that one made me know that it could happen. And we had to figure out the mechanisms that caused that remission. And we did have Coley's toxins, though even before that, I don't think Franco necessarily knew about that. Coley's was hard to make. And well, actually, you couldn't really patent Coley's toxins, which is the big thing. You couldn't patent it. So there's no money in Coley's toxins. But, you know, the best adjuvant, vaccine adjuvant, Coley's toxins, in my opinion.
Right.
I mean, for cancer specifically. I don't know about for other things. But, you know, when you look at the history and you think about the impact that could have been made with something like Coley's, a consistent batch, even in combination with chemotherapy, you would have actually had some legitimate cures.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wouldn't be a palliative therapy with metastatic stage 4 cancer. You would have had some real cures in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, they had that since 1891. The system, the establishment system attacked him. I mean, if you look at James Ewing, the Ewing sarcoma comes from James Ewing. He was a major proponent of radiation. And he was Coley's boss at Memorial Hospital, which is now Sloan Kettering.
Mm-hmm.
And they butted heads, and he wouldn't let him do it after a while. And, you think about the money and the influence that went into suppress what he was doing.
Right.
And, then you think about what's going on today in society.
Mm-hmm.
And so call me a skeptic on everything.
Right.
And people think that we're, very like, with what we do, that we just think this stuff's going to work. Like, no, we're actually very skeptical. Stem cells, we're probably the most skeptical stem cell company operators in the world. Like, you do not make a claim. We are not, like, we want to see, we pull the data, and it happened to work really, really well. But, big picture, these things were, we are being lied to about a lot of different things.
Of course.
And there are market forces and, governments and people that might not want real, cures to be out there. And the immunotherapy market has kind of messed that up for cancer.
Oh, big time. So, in thinking at this very, very high level about this and some of the forces that would want to suppress or dilute or confuse, we have to think that, okay, now that the mainstreaming of immunotherapy is happening and we will receive those outcomes, individuals, families will get those outcomes, and those outcomes will be longer, healthier lives. And if one of the forces that potentially did not want to see this is of the mindset that we need to control the growth and the spread of the human population, and something like immunotherapy becomes mainstream, then what is the constraint? What lever do we have to pull? Does that person pull now? Who, okay, maybe that thought was an action. Maybe they're in a position to constrict certain things, either in government or as the captain of industry or wherever they're at. What lever gets pulled now?
Yeah.
Right. Immunotherapy for cancer is a game changer.
Yeah.
For hundreds of thousands of people, period.
Yeah.
Millions of people, if you extrapolate this over decades. Okay, all of those people end up living, or presumably the people that live will live as a response to that treatment. Those people, presumably because of these restrictions, would not have lived. If you're of the mindset that we want to control the population, what you going to do now?
Right. No, exactly.
That's what's kind of like, where is the other curveball coming?
Yeah.
Right? Because this was a 120-year-old medical beef that started this, right?
Right.
And it could have been corrected at any point between then and now. Scientists, doctors knew this, right?
Yep.
We're okay. Now it's mainstream. Great. Great for people. Great for humanity. Great for America. Now what? Right? If there are still thoughts and people out there who want to control this, the expanse of our population, how are they going to do it?
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, you think about how sick our society is, like physically, with what they eat and all the obesity, all the diabetes, all the heart disease at young ages. You think about what is in our food. I mean, that's probably, I'm not sure this is correct, but I would guess that diet is the number one cause
of course.
Of cancer, what we eat. Even if you have some genetic factors, the epigenetics of the environmental factors of what you put in your system probably have more to do with someone getting cancer than anything. And so it is weird that we have the food pyramid, from the 1960s to 1970s, and you have nutritionists that still want to act like that is legit.
It's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, it really is sick care. And we give people bad things. We give the kids in schools horrible food. None of it's organic. Has a bunch of pesticides, glyphosate, all of this different stuff going into our systems. And so, yeah, I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist at this point.
Right, yeah.
But I don't believe they want people to be healthy.
No. If I had not had this experience in the hospital, I'd probably be with the masses of, in my understanding and almost to a degree, a defense of the status quo.
Sure.
Because I wouldn't know. I would be ignorant to what the real alternatives to this are. But you're 100% spot on. I mean, we see just with the detox of people, just with addressing that, right? We're not even talking about any therapeutics that or pills or shots or IVs or anything. Just detoxing people, the change in their overall health.
Oh my gosh,
is unbelievable.
Yeah,
and the only thing that's changed is the food. Right. I mean that is as clear cut of a example, in my opinion, of how toxic our food supply is.
Yeah,
and it's a massive cause for concern. I think that we place a lot of trust on food regulators, and I think that at least since COVID, some of that trust perhaps has eroded away. And I think that might be a good thing to start questioning our food, questioning our food supply, questioning processes and how food is handled and how livestock are raised and handled. I have the good fortune to own large expanses of land, and I'm frequently approached by outfitters who want to grow anything from pigs to quail or whatever. And, I haven't taken any action on any of those offers because I've asked critical questions about food handling and procedures, because yes, I understand that my role in this would just be someone that's land leasing this to you and you would do your thing and I have no part in the operation, but I actually don't even want to contribute to the poisoning of people. If I know that's what you're going to do.
Right.
I'll let it just sit there and be vacant.
Yeah.
Right. We can cut the trees down, maybe make some money that way. But in knowing that this is what's going down.
Yeah.
Right. I know that you're not going to be using techniques. I don't know if that's the right word for growing livestock in a way that's going to end up with a healthy product at the end.
Right. Yes.
Why would I want to participate in that?
Well,
right. And I know what the food situation is. So.
Right. I mean, if you were just a capitalist that just wanted to make money and not have an impact, then that would be your answer. We just turned down, and I say we, Deddrick, because I haven't told you that I turned down a multi-billion-dollar deal for us.
Okay.
But ethically, I turned down a multi-billion-dollar deal.
I'm gonna ride with your values, because I know that part of why our partnership works is values.
Yep.
We have shared values. I know that if there was something to come my way or your way that just truly was against our core values, whatever it is, you don't even have to tell me the details. It doesn't even matter. Like, whatever it is, I'm like, I hear $1 billion. It's like kind of hard to walk away with, but then at the same time, it's like values are impossible to walk away from.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can't walk away from my values.
Absolutely.
I can walk away from money. I can walk away from relationships. I can't walk away from my values. I got to sleep at night.
Absolutely.
That is indicative of why when we have these, conversations with our patients on the front end, that's values.
Absolutely.
That is values. That is us wanting to express ourselves to you. Like, this is who we are.
Yep.
This is just as much of us telling you who we are as it is you getting an orientation. Right. And when you see that and it spills over into all these other random situations that we have, money comes and goes. Right.
Yep.
It happens.
Absolutely.
It
and we do just fine.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting when people try to explain, or when I try to explain our relationship with you and Scotty and myself, how I just brought it up to you on this podcast is literally how we bring up, hey, by the way, turned down a big money deal, but it ain't.
All right, I know it was good. Like, you still hearing this like, it's a lot of money, because they package these things up in a way that obviously makes it appealing. Yeah. Right? Because otherwise, who would take that deal? Yeah. So they have to like sweeten it to kind of numb the effect of the value erosion.
Yes.
Right.
But we know each other so well. I knew you wouldn't care. And people are like, well, shouldn't you go to your board and talk? I'm like, but I'll go to you. Yeah. But I knew that it wasn't something that, we would do. And it was just, we know each other so well. I could just tell you that right now. Like, by the way, gave a $1 billion deal.
And also it helps that we get situations like this fairly frequently. So it's not like there's no scarcity. right, in these situations. And I think that that's important to note as well, is that's a value.
Yeah.
It's not being that person that thinks, well, oh, we're going to walk away from this, that there's never going to be another opportunity as good as this. Actually, they keep getting better.
Yeah, absolutely.
They keep actually getting better over time. So having that makes it easier to have values, right? And not being in this mindset of there's not going to be another, or we'll never get another chance, or anything like that. That's values, that's mindset,
Right.
That's being in the right frame of mind to know that not only will I get an opportunity to replace what I just walked on, it's going to be bigger and better for me and everyone around me.
Yep.
That's the one that I take. There may be 2 or 3 more that are bigger than that I don't take.
Right.
Before I get the one that I'm interested in. That takes courage, right? To be able to stick to your guns on values, because so many people are compromised. It takes clarity to know what your values are, because there's often a play on ignorance, and some propositions and some business deals are so complex that you don't really realize you're being violated until you're already in, right?
That's true.
You got to have some clarity to be able to see through that on the front end to say, this is where I would have to make a big compromise that's probably outside of the scope of what I would really want to do.
Yep.
We'll pass, right? On the front end, the first 80% of the way, man, this is awesome. Oh, but then this is the compromise. This is where Scooby-Doo reveal, like, oh, no, we can't do this. Right? Yeah. So having that clarity and the confidence to just walk away from it. And honestly, I think people who make these propositions themselves might not even be aware that there's a value conflict. And I don't, having the empathy to know that they're not doing this intentionally.
Oh, I told them. I said, there's no judgment towards you.
Yeah.
Just from a value standpoint, ethically, I just would not feel good with myself.
Yeah.
And, I said, I can pretty much speak for Scotty and Deddrick that they're going to feel this way too.
Yeah.
And, but it's the business world, the stem cell world that we live in. There's a lot of opportunities that we might not align with ethically, that we're not judgmental towards them for doing it.
No.
But it's, it's not worth us compromising our value. If we don't have our values, Deddrick,
it don't matter.
What do we have, man?
We become hypocrites.
Yeah.
Immediately. The moment we begin to compromise our values when it comes to important things, important partnerships, important collaborations, because how can we sit in front of that patient on their first day in our hospital and have an honest conversation about getting on track, getting in the right mindset, the power of the mind, being vulnerable, having values, all of these things that we talk about? How can we do that? And we're not even practicing it ourselves.
Right.
We're making personal compromises that affect the whole business, the whole team.
Yeah.
Right. How can we even, with any real integrity, have those conversations with people? We can't.
You can't.
You can't. So
it's so important. And that's the thing about, I think good partnerships, and which, I don't take it for granted having you and Scotty as partners, but being able to have 2 other people that I 110% trust and know are going to back me up no matter what. And I'm sure you feel the same way, and Scotty feels the same way.
Yeah.
It's, you can move mountains when you have that alignment and trust with 2 other people who are smart as hell, have their own unique strengths, and can move shit, together.
Right.
I wish other people would build that trust to experience it with people.
Yeah. It's funny because Randy Davis, one of our mentors, one of my good close friends and mentors, he talks about how rare it is that our relationship thrives at a high level. And he says, I've been doing this for all of these years. I've been doing the seminars and coaching business owners. And he's like, under normal circumstances, I dissuade people from these type of partnerships because typically there is a misalignment in values. And at some point, one person, their values become divergent from the group. And he says, what you guys have is very special and unique because that has not happened. Your values are so closely aligned and you trust each other so much that you can function collectively and independently as a group and build something amazing. And, he still probably wouldn't be an advocate of these type of relationships because he understands human nature.
Yeah.
But we are those outliers. We are 3 people that, have opened ourselves up to a relationship like this.
Yeah.
And went with it.
Yeah.
Right. And in one of the most, from the, I'm going to use the word interesting ways possible in buying a hospital in Tijuana, Mexico. None of us speak Spanish. None of us, we don't have any real ties to Mexico or anything. To attempt something like this requires an exceptional level of trust.
And we lived together.
Lived in this
for
thing
and pretty much the entire time. We still have a place in TJ together.
Yeah. And that adds, for us, that adds glue to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, they're so intolerable to live with that would have added. And if it's so hard, it's so hard to live with it.
Why do you think, because people think, you work together and live together. And by the way, the first 6-7 years, I mean, we were working almost 24 hours a day. We would wake up, drink coffee together,
get to it,
get to work, come back home, have dinner together, always talking about work.
Mm-hmm.
It's all we did, 7 days a week, pretty much. But like in the entire time, we might have had like 2 or 3 arguments ever, like real arguments.
Right.
Why do we get? We have a lot of debate, by the way, but not arguments. Right. Why do we get along so well? What is that?
One, there was a lot of wine. So that helps lubricate.
Wine helps a lot. That's right.
Lubricate these conversations. There is individual respect that we all have that doesn't, at least for me and my perspective, I don't think anything personal, right? I don't think it's a personal attack, right. And I know that if something didn't happen or something didn't go the way that we wanted it to, that it wasn't because someone didn't give their best.
110. Right.
It's not, it isn't that. Do we want the best outcome? Of course, we always do. Let's try to systemically solve that. If we see someone over here that needs support, let's try to do it. We don't have arguments because we all understand the concept of team.
Yes.
Right? The team wins or loses.
That's it.
Right?
It's 110%.
It's not one individual person is winning or losing. It doesn't work that way. Like, I cannot go out and be great in this venture without Ed and Scott.
Right.
It just doesn't. It will not work.
Well, same.
Right.
And if like, let's say I win at something, that team wins. If you win, the team wins. We all feel the losses too.
Right.
So it's like, we've all, let's call it, failed at certain things at different times.
Yes.
But I don't think we've ever, I know we've never come down hard on one another. No. Been like, what did you, it's like, no, you gave 110%.
It happens.
Sometimes things don't work out. Right. And, the other thing I think is interesting about our partnership is that if, there's with Scott and Deddrick, if one of us has an idea and is more passionate about it, but 2 of us disagree, we go with the guy that's more passionate about getting it done. If
you're willing to push it forward, I'll push with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if I'm not entirely sure, I will push with you, because alignment is more important than agreement.
Amen, man.
We don't have to agree. We have to be aligned.
That's right.
Right? Us rowing in the same direction at the same pace is much more important ultimately than having a precise map of exactly.
Yes.
And that's, again, goes back to being open-minded on how things can be done.
Right.
Right? Being not, combative about how things are being done would assume that I know how to do them. Mm-hmm. And there's very little that I know how to do. The things I know how to do are very, very few and specific. Mm-hmm. So I have to be open-minded.
Right.
Because that's part of innovation. You're always in territory where there is no clear map. There is no clear way to go. Now, if we want to stop innovating and we want to just build a perfect mousetrap to catch the same mouse,
right,
then yes, we can critique how to do things in that way. But in innovation territory, it's foggy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very, very foggy.
And we've always been innovating. Yes. I mean, there's never been a time where we're like, we're not going to do any more innovation. It's been all innovation. How do we do the best and figure out, really, how do we cure cancer? That's like a question that we have. We want to cure solid tumor cancer. Then it was, how do we build the best lab in the world for cancer, which I think we've done.
Yes.
I have a strong argument for that we've done that. But getting there, is so hard, man. Holy shit. We just get in there and grind.
Yes.
But when I look back at even the last 2 years, I mean, they all seem tough, but like the 2 years when I remember the closest, with this renovation and all the bullshit, it's been hard as hell, man.
It is.
I mean, how, like, you think, is it just that most people aren't willing to go through that to get what they want?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there is, in our society, we have individualized people so much that we've lost real context of struggle. And like everybody's such a person that any slight to their feelings or whatever, that kind of can be extrapolated to how they view the whole world, right? Whereas if you have this mindset that, I'm a person in the world, and to achieve great things, I must do hard things. If that is your mindset, then you see hard things as an opportunity. The hardest thing is the way. The thing that you don't want to do is the thing that you probably should be doing.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so, and it's hard to awaken to that in theory. Right? Like I can say this and someone can hear it and they could perhaps even agree with it. But until you go out and do hard things and experience the hardship and what's on the other side of the hard thing, then it's really, really difficult to take in, because the pain of the hard thing on the front end is just like, oh my, I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks. And we're just, as a society, I mean, people are pussies. Like that we raise kids, everybody gets a trophy, everybody wins, nobody wants to take an L.
Well,
nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to take it away. And you got to take some L's to win. It's just,
that's right.
Yeah.
You actually said this before I heard Dana say it, but you're talking about there's never been a time where it's been easier to be successful.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Why is that?
We were just talking about, so I think the time and season that we are in now, that intentionally or perhaps even unintentionally, there is messaging that is almost seducing people out of strength, right? It can seem that certain individualistic ideas and ideals about how we should approach life and take chances and be present, it can seem as if those are somehow negative traits or toxic, right? And what's happening is people, especially younger people who maybe don't have as much experience in life, would take at face value some slide or some video telling them that a set of behaviors is bad without experiencing them for themselves, right? This isn't your parents telling you. This isn't somebody that you respect. This is your phone telling you that certain behaviors are bad or toxic when those have made people great for centuries. These same traits, these same attributes have been working for centuries in this society. But now all of a sudden they're toxic, they're bad. Okay? And you accept that without any real critical thought. Right? So I think a part of the problem isn't just this one example, and this is an example, right, of like this messaging that people are buying into. It kind of gets them to be weak about certain shit. It's really an overall lack of critical thinking.
Yes.
And then acceptance of images and sounds that you're not questioning where this came from, or why are you trying to teach me this, or why would that be toxic? What would be the exact opposite of this scenario? People aren't really thinking about images. They're taking stuff and running with it, right? And they're building a life that allows people who are critical thinkers to run right past them, right? And very resolute people who can be very singular focused, regardless of what you think about them, what you think about their positions, how much you like them, are right now have a clear path to success, because so many people are they've fallen into victimhood.
Mm.
They're confused about whether or not being assertive or being strong is a good thing or a bad thing. Well, if you're confused, I'm not. I'm going to the front.
Yeah.
Like that. Those type of things are subtle, but you cascade that out across millions of people.
Yes.
And it just becomes so much easier to be successful if you don't feed into that shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you already have it made up in your mind, hey, I'm going to be successful. I hear this. I won't even mind thinking about it, or maybe thinking about how maybe I could change things or be a better person. Cool. But ultimately, I'm not with this weak shit. I know I have to be strong to get through the hard things.
Exactly, man.
Being weaker, or what I perceive to be weaker, isn't going to help me.
Right. That's what it is. It's like, for whatever reason, it's got like, you see the victim mentality. I always say it's like the victim Olympics. Like, who's the bigger victim? Like, I'm the champion victim over here.
The biggest victim.
Who's the biggest victim?
Yeah.
And, they get, certain praise out of it, and they get an excuse to why they aren't successful.
Yeah.
And the problem, though, is when people actually believe that, you get this group think of victimhood.
Yep.
That it's okay. I mean, it's not okay to be stuck in the circumstance that might have caused a bad situation at the time for your whole life.
Right, yeah.
You have to let that go. You have to take responsibility for that specific situation to the point that you're not going to let it control your entire life. Now, the victim would say, but this happened to me and you're not being sensitive. Like, I can make a victim argument to almost everything, man.
Anything.
And I look at, it's like low energy too. It's not hard to be a victim to everything. I mean, you think about all the things that we've been through, Deddrick.
Yep.
Imagine if we made up these stories, these victimhood stories about all the bad crap. And we've had so much stuff happen to us in Mexico. People, we would be the Olympic gold medal victim champion, if we wanted to be, but we choose not to be, and it's caused us to be successful. But it's like a virus of people's minds, and I've looked at it from like a country. Like, imagine, Deddrick, imagine if we get involved in politics one day, and we can actually teach society this. Not coming from a Democrat or a Republican or whatever, but that the mindset that they are being taught actually hurts them more than helps them. It actually disempowers them instead of empowers them. We haven't had a politician that's done that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think politics in many ways capitalizes on victimhood.
Yes.
And a better way, if I were to be the type of person to capitalize off victimhood, would be to create systems of victim validation. How can I reward? Because humans respond to rewards. How can I reward you systemically for being a victim or for displaying victim characteristics? And that allows people to stay in very clearly defined boxes, right? Because if we think about a lot of the boxes that are designed politically, they're designed around like kind of victim lines. Like, how have you been victimized? All right, we need you to stay over here. Right. So we can count on you when we need you. But we're not really going to help you get out of this victim scenario, but we just need you to stay right here. That mindset of victim validation is a trap. Right. And it seems good. And I think people have the right intention.
Yes, I agree with that as well.
I think that the intention is good, but we've gotten very far down the road, especially with young men, and allowing them to, when life gets challenging, that they can become victims and achieve the same things that those of us who are not victims. And it just does not work that way. That's why I said it's easier, because I see that so many people are being baited into these victim validation circles. And it's just, okay, cool. That's what you want to do. Don't think that you're going to achieve the same things that I will.
Right.
And don't think that you deserve them.
Right.
Because you don't. And I'm here to remind you that you don't.
Right.
And that part comes off as, that's probably what Dana was getting. That's what, it comes up, but it is what it is. Like, you really think that you are going to be a victim and attempt the things that Dana White is doing and be successful? Absolutely. I bet he's got some stories to tell,
Exactly.
So You got to roll with it. You got to be able to get through the difficult parts. And if you don't feel like you have the tools, seek out people who do. Align yourself with strong people who have those characteristics.
Yeah.
You know, I just like the victim validation is a trap. The thing that's going to set you free is being surrounded by people who are not victims, who can remind you of what it's like to go through and overcome and be strong. If young people, especially young adults, are not choosing those relationships,
right?
You know, we're gonna get a separation in society,
right?
Right,
there is,
and it's happening.
Yeah,
and, you know, we can argue it's been happening, but I think it's easier to create these little victim validation circles now with the internet and groups and it's targeting. I mean, you know, one person has one bad experience, you can like, boom, put a tag on them and just run ads at them to make more victim purchases, right? There's a whole marketplace to, you know, buy things that perpetuate your victimhood.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a marketplace.
Yes.
And somebody's got to disrupt it.
Yeah,
right. Somebody's got to disrupt it.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild to think about that. It's actually a debate that being a victim is better than being personally responsible.
Yeah, it's wild.
You know, people get personal responsibility confused too, because that doesn't mean if someone was, let's say, sexually assaulted when they were a kid.
Right.
They're not responsible for that, what happened.
No.
But if they stay in that victim story forever, they're never going to be able to get through life. And so unless they take responsibility for how they react moving forward, they're not going to get through that. And that's the extreme.
Yeah.
Of course.
Of course.
And of course people are damaged and those types. I'm not saying that. There's a difference between those. But I think it's important because, you know, right now we are in trouble in society. It has never been easier for us to be successful because there's so many weak men out there, straight up.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, people believe, you were talking about, you don't believe, you know, when it's bullshit. I'll give you an example of some bullshit. They're talking about the women's pay gap.
Okay.
So I started doing a bunch of research, reading all these, you know, papers and kind of digging in. And it says, oh, well, you know, one of the talking points is women make 76% of what men make. And imagine this, Deddrick, with our $2 million payroll, we would save, if we just hired, if that were the case, I would just hire women and save 24%
of course.
on everything because we believe women are equal to men.
Yeah.
And if I could get a woman for
75%.
Give me a break. It was like, it's bullshit. But when I started digging in, here's what they don't tell you. They weren't talking hourly pay. Most of these studies are not taking into consideration hourly. Men are working on average, let's say 42 hours a week, women 37. And that's where they show the pay gap. Or women are working part-time.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, that's not what people think of. When I first hear those headlines, I'm like, well, that's not fair. A woman shouldn't make less than a man. I believe that. I don't think they should make less than a man. But when you dig into it, that whole story and narrative is bullshit that put women in this victim mentality of, oh, well, I need women's empowerment. And I can't do it because men are horrible. So they put the blame, that's victimhood. They put the blame on somebody else, men or the patriarchy or all this, quite frankly, bullshit that people believe.
Right. Well, see, the order of thinking that you just displayed of, okay, I receive a sensational headline. Okay. My initial response is, I kind of align with that. I don't think women should do. But let me look into the methodology that produced this headline.
Yes.
Oh, the headline is a little bit misleading or a lot bit misleading because it doesn't take these things into consideration. Now, that data was not hidden. Their methodology of how they arrived at this data is not hidden.
Right.
You just have to read.
Yes.
Right. And you just have to think and read and process information and say, oh, what they're getting at is that if this were a true apples to apples, if it were hourly pay without the consideration of maternity leave or, you know, taking off work early to spend more time with children because women have more. I've seen some of this data too. And I just looked at the methodology and like, okay, well, that makes sense. Why men make more. And there's certain occupations where men are paid more and it's just disproportionately male. And there aren't very many disproportionately female positions that pay as much. That might be a separate conversation. That's not what's being said though.
Right.
Right. So But that you gotta read, right?
Right.
You actually have to think about stuff and say, okay, this is interesting. Our first response is going to be feel because we're human, but our immediate response should be think and question, right? Because our initial response is probably not accurate, right? And I want to know what is accurate, what is right based on what this person and the data that they're presenting. So, you got people who build whole movements off of headlines without reading any of the data, right? And that is not just intellectually lazy, that's dangerous, right? Because you can take to the streets in protests without accurate data and lose your life. Protesting is very dangerous. A protest is one hit away from being a riot, right? Every protest is. I don't care how peaceful your origins are or what your intentions are. The moment that there are people with visors, shields, and bulletproof vests, it's dangerous.
Yes, absolutely.
If their presence is there, and it will be there, it just got dangerous.
Absolutely.
And if you are risking your life on a movement and individually, you don't have a firm sense of the numbers. Now, you could have read that and you could have read that data and been like, okay, I understand why there's a disparity and I still think it's wrong. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fine. But to not have done that and then to be surprised when someone brings this up,
right,
that lets me know, okay, you didn't take the time to really, develop this opinion. You just let the opinion develop you.
Right.
And again, that's dangerous. As an individual, as a society, that is so easy to get people so worked up.
Yes.
With less than a certain number of characters, that sets us up to be victims of terror, psyops, right? Because other countries are looking at this and they'll be like, Americans are getting so
They're
worked
so
up.
gullible.
Right. Right? They get worked up over these headlines and images, and those don't require us to have a large military. They don't require, this complex network of spies and insurgents and people underground. No, we can have like 2 or 3 guys sitting in a room just cranking out videos and fake headlines all day, or we could just program our AI to just make certain themes and cascade them out throughout our different channels so that people can see them and start feeling crazy. And since we know they're not going to read, we know that they're not going to do any real critical thought.
Right.
It's just stirring up this emotional frenzy.
Yep.
Right. And that's a type of warfare tactic now.
Oh, I mean, Deddrick,
it is 100% obvious right there.
If I were, like, let's say the United States were my enemy, I could so manipulate the people. Just think about, and this isn't talking bad about people, but people are so gullible. They don't read. There's, a couple sides right now, Republican, Democrat.
Right.
You either believe in this or you believe in that. And the critical thinking on both sides, it's so bad. It's hard for me to have a conversation right now with really anyone when it comes that says I'm a Republican or Democrat and like puts the flag deep because they're not open to, having different views. I mean, people look at, like, I support Trump now.
Right.
I didn't support Trump years ago.
Right.
A lot of critical thinking has gone into why I support him now.
Right.
But I see why someone would support Kamala Harris. I can see why.
Yeah.
And, they say, well, I just don't like, I hate Trump so bad. Now, people put you in boxes, though. And if I were a foreign adversary, I mean, you could just drive that wedge, prey on people's gullibility, ignorance, weakness, put society into a victim bucket. Can you imagine? Like, your job is to attack Americans. You would make them all weak.
Yep.
You would make the men weak.
Yep.
You would make the women hate the men. You would make the men and women not know if they're men and women and question the definition. I mean, you would mix things up a lot and confuse it up as much as possible and make the sane people feel completely crazy.
Right.
And that's exactly what's being done. Now, I don't know if it's a foreign adversary. I don't know who's doing it, but it is clear, man. If you think critically and you take a critical thinking view into everything you do right now, it's all fucked up. And smart people are not thinking right now.
Yeah, there's appears to be an intelligent and intentional attempt to destabilize a certain vein of American thinking, especially as it pertains to government, trust in the media and information, leadership, regardless of one's kind of like natural or default political ideals. There's this destabilization that creates these echo chambers where one wouldn't listen to an opinion or perspective that does not specifically align with what they're being fed. And that is dangerous. That creates a clear separation. And the clearer that separation is, the easier it will be to be exploited, whether that be domestically, internationally, because who's who, right, is the big thing that we want to figure out, because, it might be more advantageous to take advantage of these people now and then those people later, but we need to be able to identify them. Well, if we just start these echo chambers and everybody is aligned by echo chamber, and I can identify you based on where you're getting your echo chamber information from geographically, who doesn't have their location turned on.
Right.
I know exactly where you are. I can read your mind because the thoughts that you're typing in to ChatGPT and Google, those are your thoughts. The questions you're asking are your thoughts. So we can read those. There's no privacy on the internet. We can read those thoughts. We can read that, or some party could have access to that, and that they have your location. So you mean to tell me that we systemically aren't critically thinking? We have divulged our location. We have divulged our alliances through a number of clicks and questions that we ask on our phones. I mean, why send an army over, right?
Exactly.
What would be your objective at this point? Like, you already got, you kind of got everybody by the balls. Like, you already know where everybody's at. Like, why even muster up? Why even raise the money to send the army over when your objective may have been to just push more product? Or profit off of American society more.
Or destroy it from within.
Right, destroy it from within and still profit from it. Because I think that there's a huge commercial interest and opportunity from subdividing America's society this way.
Yeah.
And it's easier to market to people when they self-select into certain groups, right? Once they opt in and say, oh, I'm this person, I like to think this way. Oh, great, I got a product for you.
Here's your confirmation bias.
Right. Here you go. The more that we do that, and the more that people keep doubling down into extreme ideas, right? Because that's what's happening. It's one thing to be one side or the other. It's another thing when you're doubling down, and your double down becomes more extreme than the time before. Because now you're pulling further and further away from being able to even relate to someone who doesn't have the same opinion. The internet makes that doubling down scenario that rapid, almost instant.
Right.
Before the internet, you would have had to read books and maybe go to a rally or develop an opinion that was really, 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 really strong and informed to be a very, very, very extreme political person. Those people were almost seen as like weirdos and madmen that had these very extreme political ideas. Now almost everybody has them.
Right. Yeah.
Almost everybody is the villager with the pitchfork on some idea that they really have just been fed and probably haven't dug too deep into.
Right.
Which is wild.
They haven't read past the headline and whatever the article said.
Right.
It's like,
right.
You think about during COVID. I mean, you were there with me the whole time, and I was one of the first, like, talking shit. Like, I'm reading these papers.
Yes.
What they're saying on TV is not what the papers say. They're not asking the questions in these papers, by the way, that they should be asking.
No.
And there's a whole group of great scientists over here that are saying something completely different, and they're being shut out. Why is that? And, you saw it throughout, man. And this is where I think critical thinking took a big turn. I'll give you one example. The first example. The question that I asked as it was happening, and I did not support Trump. I
Mhm.
thought, if you remember, all through Trump's presidency,
Mhm.
I said, there's no way they're going to let this guy stay president. Something's going to happen. They're going to, the
Right.
last year,
Yeah,
something's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
blow
yeah.
everything up.
Yeah.
It's like, there's
Yeah.
no way.
Yeah.
He's causing too
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
divide. And so in January of 2020, I was like, oh, I guess I was wrong. Looks like they're not going to crash this economy or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
March, COVID comes out. And I asked the question, what are the odds that the most divisive president in our lifetime,
Mhm.
who is going after the powers that be, I mean, whether you agree with them or not,
Mhm.
the people that he's against are the people that I'm against.
Right,
That's what I'm saying. I don't agree exactly how he does things, but I'm
Right.
like, okay, those that are pulling the strings, those that were upset when Edward Snowden released the NSA documents, those that wanted to put him in jail, those that were going after Julian Assange, those are the enemy to me.
Right.
The big pharma, truly,
Right.
that's the enemy to me.
Right.
And so he is going after them.
He
He
is.
caused 0 wars. I was an anti-war activist back in the day. No wars, dude.
Right.
And so when you look at that, who is the last person to cause that much problem? His talk aside, JFK.
Right.
And he was assassinated.
Yeah.
And so the idea that we get a virus out of the blue that at first they said came from bats.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to say that it came from a lab in China, you were racist.
Yep.
So they first used that.
Yep.
And then the virus turns out to be coming from a lab in China, which they still won't fully admit, even though they pretty much admit it.
Right.
And the country gets locked down with something that in April of 2020, I predict the 0.023 overall death rate for COVID.
Okay.
It's about that.
Wow.
How did I know that in 2020? I did the fucking math, man.
Right.
I divided the people by weight, by age, and came up with an assumption.
Yeah.
But it was
a conceptual number that's
it was
based
so
on
close, but much closer than everybody else's that was public. Why is that? Critical thinking. Like, let's dig into the numbers.
Right.
What does this say? What do these other scientists over here say?
Right.
How deadly is this really? What age groups is it killing?
Right.
What are the pre-existing conditions that make someone more susceptible to a severe reaction? And just by asking those questions, I was sent messages. You just want people to die. You don't. I'm like, actually the opposite.
Right.
I want people to live.
Right.
What are the unintended consequences that are going to happen from shutting everything down? You see the all-cause mortality going up and up and up. Why is that? Addictions going through the roof. Why is that?
Child abuse.
Yeah.
Suicide. We all knew this was going to happen as soon as
Well, we did.
Yeah.
Society. Listen, we knew this was going to happen.
Yep.
The average person, when I brought it up, attacked me.
Yep. I remember that.
So where is the critical thinking? So I say all that, Deddrick, because I believe if we can get people to actually think again, make thinking a
great
thing
again. Make thinking great again.
Yeah. Make thinking great again. I think we can go a long way, but people are so programmed, really, really smart people are so programmed to think their way.
Right.
If you were to say during COVID, you're doing your own research, that was always praised in the past.
Right.
But they're like, don't do your own
doing
research.
your own research.
So
yeah.
I guess that was a long little talk from me. What are your thoughts on those ideas and what we saw?
So the big thing that I saw with COVID was how fear, if introduced to the masses. So we just had this whole talk about how critical thinking, but there's like an accelerant to a lack of critical thinking, and it's fear. Okay, fear makes people even less likely because there's an urgency to the situation. It's a pandemic. There's lockdowns. There's masks. There's show me your papers. There's all of this stuff is going on. people now have another excuse to not read. They have another excuse to not think. And I don't think it's entirely all just, oh, I'm not going to, I'm not a critical thinker because I'm anti-critical thinking. Some people don't have the tools. They're not being encouraged to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
It's not already before COVID, it already wasn't trending in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was not very optimistic that if the government released anything about COVID that was not, or that could be considered debatable, I was not optimistic on how that would be received by the public because of the erosion of critical thinking and the fear. You compound fear, then you start threatening people's wages and lifestyles. There's a coercive effect to how certain messages can be put out there, right? When I am being told that I must behave this way or I'm going to lose my job, my source of income, and the cascading effect of losing my house and probably my family. No, I'm not going to critically think about this shit. I was just told I'm going to lose everything if I do.
Right.
Right? So has someone or something that has that much power and control over you is really, really challenging, because we can sit here and we are fortunate enough to not be in that situation, where, okay, I can just not agree with this shit. Like, nobody's going to take my other job, right? Nobody's going to take that away from me. But so many people allow themselves to be in that situation. And what I've seen since COVID is for those people who, they may have walked back certain claims. The government may have walked back certain claims that they purported to be true at that time, in that moment. I don't see that there really being a lot of growth in preparation for if something like that were to happen again.
Sure.
So that you wouldn't be such at the whim or the mercy of those people who are making those edicts. I want people to be free to make decisions, not completely unencumbered by their financial circumstance, to think about it without having their livelihoods questioned if that's within reason. And I just saw over COVID, like, I had to learn how to respect other people's right to be afraid, even if I believe their fear is complete bullshit. I had to just respect that you are afraid, and be a friend and a confidant, a brother to people who are afraid of something that maybe they shouldn't be as afraid of.
Right.
And I need to be supportive of them, even though I know that this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And in the moment, that's what they need.
Right.
Right. They don't need me telling them why this isn't, you know what I'm saying? That's
absolutely.
And that took a lot for me to be present there for people. Like, okay, you're scared of this. You probably shouldn't be. You're young. You're healthy. You don't go anywhere anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I just got to be there for you. So it helped me in that regard, like, empathize with irrationality.
Yes.
Like, you are completely thinking about this in a way that maybe doesn't make the most sense. You're trusting people who may not have your best interest in mind. And even if they do, they perhaps are aligned with people who are profiting from this whole situation, which calls something into question. But okay, we are here.
Yeah.
All right. How do we get back on track?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't let you be a victim.
Right.
And just be a victim to COVID, because what's that going to do, right? But I have to at least be sensitive to, like, you are afraid. You're legitimately afraid of this.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm not.
Right.
but and like, how are we going to do this when society is telling you to look at someone like me as your enemy?
Yes. It's a great
someone who doesn't have a vaccine. Your society is telling me, you've known me your whole life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That I'm the enemy now? Okay. How do I deal with those situations?
Think about that. Society is telling you that I'm the enemy now because I didn't get a vaccine. And we're generally healthy people.
Yeah.
We're definitely doing the research.
Yeah.
And when you say bullshit, and this is interesting because some people will hear bullshit and think that you didn't think COVID was serious.
Right. No.
And it's not that.
No, not at all.
It's, you said afterwards, someone young, healthy.
Yeah.
Well, they generally don't have much to worry about. Does that mean that some people aren't going to get bad outcomes? Of course. But it's, and that's where the critical thinking goes into. It seems to be lost on society, and COVID just accelerated because of the fear.
Oof.
With the fear, can you imagine, people saying, you didn't get the vaccine, you're evil, stay away. It reminds me, same thing with Trump right now. If you support Trump, people are like, how dare you? I'm not talking to you.
Right.
What is wrong with you?
Right.
I mean, if they were to, if people that say that were to sit down and talk to us, I could explain everything very well to them why.
Right.
I have a problem personally that Kamala didn't get democratically elected in her primary. It was bullshit.
Right.
We said, we were talking on the podcast for a long time, Biden's mental acuity is not there.
Right.
So he's clearly off. And then the mainstream media, the same mainstream media that were pushing the vaccines, that were pushing the wars all over the world, the same mainstream media was saying, oh, no, he's fine. He's sharper than ever.
Come on now.
And, people just bought it. Hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
And then when the debate happened, which, by the way, I didn't think Biden looked that bad in the debate compared to a lot of his other gaffes.
Speeches,
But then that's when they decided to manipulate the public, kick him out, and install. I thought it was going to be Gavin Newsom or Kamala, and sure enough,
that's it.
Look at where we're at.
This is a pattern of we're going to gaslight you, and then come out with the truth later.
Yes.
Right. Like that. This has been a pattern I've seen since COVID.
Yeah.
Like we're going to say, like, you go back to the whole bad thing. Like you can't say that it's bad, so you can't say it's from a lab in China. But then we're going to like quietly say, it was from a lab in China. But think of all the damage and the collateral damage and the relationship damage that was done between the thinkers or just people who were in opposition for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
They might even been critically thinking. They just happened to be in opposition of this.
Right.
Think of all the relationship damage across families, friend groups, co-worker groups. And then everybody was expected to go back to work.
Yeah, and be fine. The other one, masks.
Yeah.
It was proven with unequivocally that cloth masks don't work at all.
Yep.
And they probably cause more harm.
Right.
And then the Cochrane report, which is the largest meta-analysis or the top meta-analysis peer review, said that masks don't work at all in public. And, the fact that you think about all the divide that masks cost, these stupid cloth masks. You know how hard it was for me to put on a fucking cloth mask?
It's rough, man.
Like, really? And I got to deal with dumb people coming at me saying, put your mask on. Yeah, put your mask. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean, yeah, damage.
Right.
Damage. We had to deal with a bunch of idiots for, years with this. And it was more in our face because we were the counterculture.
Yeah.
We were standing up against this shit. We're raw dog in the air walking down the street.
Right. Right. The whole mask thing to me was wild because I would have thought that without doing any research, that the intuitive gut instinct of anyone that had been in an airport or on an airplane, like, hey, let's try to get down to some meat and potatoes thinking. You want me to stand 6 feet away from someone in the terminal and then basically sit on their lap in an airplane.
Yes.
As if any protective measures that we did at the terminal mattered.
Clearly. But don't think about that, Deddrick.
Don't think about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to wear a condom until the very end. When it's really important.
Right.
And expect to get the same outcome. That's crazy.
Yeah. I'm gonna walk to a restaurant table with my mask on, but then take it off at the table.
Because it can only transmit when we not. I'm kind of a little disappointed in like the comedy community for not making more light of some of these policies.
Yeah.
Because I would have expected this stuff to have been clowned into, high heaven, but it didn't. That some did, but I'm like, nobody sees this a little bit silly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, take all the science, take everything off the table. Like, this doesn't seem strange to you that we're doing this.
Yeah.
And like people are being very, very serious about it. Like, that doesn't. Like, I was never really mad at any of this stuff. Like, when I would encounter people who had a strong position, I would almost think it was funny. Because I would think that they were playing with me. Like, are you serious with that? Are you pulling my leg right now?
Right.
You really, like, I was in the airport, man. And you know how they did this thing where they had the feet, like, 6 feet apart, and you were supposed to stand on some feet. So I was, like, standing, like, a little bit in front of a pair of feet. And, like, this guy comes and, like, kind of, like, backs me up. Like, what? I laughed at him. And he's like, hey, this isn't funny, man. This is serious. I'm like, I'm not even going to explain it to you.
Right. We're getting on a plane.
Right. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
We're standing in line to go sit on a plane.
Yeah.
What are you?
But the plane has such good circulation.
What?
It's like you're sitting right next to somebody.
What?
And, that's the lack of critical thinking that we saw. I remember the first time I flew from Nashville to San Diego during COVID. It was April, so this is fresh.
Yeah.
And I bought a first class ticket thinking, that's what I normally buy. And the only people traveling were in first class, and the whole back of the plane was empty, which is kind of funny.
Right.
So, like, we're full in first class. Nobody else is flying on the plane. And I'm sitting on the plane next to somebody. I'm like, this is stupid. Like, we're 6 feet apart generally, but now we're like right next to each other. And I get off the plane and go to get my bag. And the guy next to me, because there's people in the line in the row, he's like, well, so much for social distancing.
What?
And I pulled down my mask and I said, fuck off. I was so mad. I was like, let it out. But what are you talking about, dude?
Right.
You're saying I'm crazy. Maybe I am crazy.
Right.
But this shit seems crazy to me. We're supposed to believe this. And there's so many people that just ate it up and they got judgy and you're bad because of not getting the vaccine. And do you remember when they were pushing this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated? And they said, if you got the vaccine, you couldn't spread COVID.
Oh, yeah. That was,
and then I had 2 friends who I love that made posts on Facebook about how they sat next to an unvaccinated person and the unvaccinated person gave them COVID. And I'm like, you're vaccinated and you got COVID. What the fuck are you talking about?
Right. Read this back as slowly as you need to until it makes sense.
Because they were told that if they got the vaccine, they couldn't spread COVID. And that's where the damage, as you were saying, more damage that came in by their lies. People actually thought, well, if I get the vaccine, I can't spread COVID. We found out that was complete bullshit. And so, lack of critical thinking after COVID has made it a lot easier for guys like us, Deddrick, to be successful.
Yeah, if I didn't, if I ever needed validation on, the trajectory of my life, because things don't really happen in a vacuum, right? We're always in this dynamic universe of people and all these nebulous factors. COVID was it. Like, okay, people just are not going to use their thinking in that way, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not here to judge them or judge that, but, whereas I would have possibly approached and gave the benefit of the doubt that people think critically, I do not do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You just can't.
You do this better than almost anybody I know. You actually block out
a
lot of different media.
Yeah.
Like during COVID, as you were just saying, you stopped getting those things in your news feed. Why do you do that?
Focus. Our conscious minds have bandwidth, right? And we're being bombarded with stimuli at all times. And, our phones and mobile devices make it easier than ever for unsolicited images and thoughts and ideas to come across our scope to be received. And, I believe that in situations where I need to lead, where I need to focus, that is dangerous. The counter argument to that will be, well, you're cutting yourself off from information. But I'm like, is this really information? Right? I'll take the risk that this might be bullshit or heavily laden with bullshit and not engage it at all and be focused on what I can see, what I can validate, what I can rely on, or at least with a reasonable probability of truth and trust. I'll take that over being fed polarizing headlines, right? And it's just I didn't want to risk, our business, my family, or anything by consuming this information.
Yeah.
Because I already saw what this was. This is an attempt to destabilize. And there's a real disease out here, but how we are acting does not seem to be in line with the real threat.
Yeah.
And if the media is going to push narratives one way or the other, I don't need to be a part of that.
Right.
I have very important things to focus on right now.
Yeah. A company not going bankrupt.
Right. Very important things to focus on. And this is not going to be one of them.
Yeah.
I'm open to any significant changes to help change my thinking, but I already know where to go to get that information. Right. Especially as it pertains to COVID. I already know and have trusted, reliable sources. People I can pick up the phone and call. Now, of course, I'm in a different situation in space, but I was aware enough that there was other opinions or ideas and people that I could vet, things that maybe were concerning, and get a different perspective or understand what they were thinking with this test or this study, that I didn't really feel the need for news media.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would help me at all. And, I don't watch television. So I'm already not like heavily invested in receiving messages this way. So it wasn't that big of a personal lift for me to make the change, but it did, I think, give me a lot of mental clarity over that time, that I think a lot of people got like intellectually fatigued because it's like there's so many new messages. There's this ticker that's flowing on your screen or on your phone about all of these new cases. Yeah. And it's just like driving people nuts. And I'm like, I don't want to be one of those people. I'm not immune to psyops. Like, I don't have a force field. Like, why would I just say no? Is my strategy for the drug of media. Just don't even engage it. Yeah. Or limit my engagement to just the bare essentials until we get beyond this, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, Jim Brewer, I think that's his name. Jim Brewer has a clip. He's like, "Trust the science, like a parrot,
Right.
Wear your mask,
right.
over and over and over again, hysterical. And that's what it reminded me of. I noticed in March of 2020 when they were just shutting everything down. I watched the news like 4 days in a row. I was in Nashville, and I was having these weird nightmares, man.
I could imagine.
I'm like, what is going on? I mean, it was like the world could be ending.
Right.
And, that does play a big role. And we have to be super careful. We still had, a couple hundred employees to take care of. We had a hospital to run. Yeah. We had to comfort our patients because people were more concerned with COVID than they were metastatic cancer, which was wild. We saw a lot of people die from their cancer because they were so afraid of COVID.
Yeah, one of the most heartbreaking parts about the whole COVID experience was those patients, and I mean, this happened immediately. Those patients who got fired by their oncologists and their PCPs and were not allowed to come in and receive treatment because they have cancer. And, what are they to do? Right? Like, what do you just tell some stage 4 cancer patient you can't get treatment?
Right.
Because you're immunocompromised. Yeah, because I have cancer. Right? Like, we have the known big deal here. And that was very, very difficult for me to process that scenario as not a one-off, but almost a systemic response to patients that were in very delicate situations. They really relied on their local healthcare to not have the same type of access to different spaces because of their disease.
Right.
well, that's why these spaces exist.
Right, exactly.
It's to treat their disease. So, you know, that was challenging for me because, you know, as someone who provides healthcare and curates a space for people to come in and receive healing, to take that away because of something like COVID,
right?
It seemed somewhat immoral or against my vibe. I don't believe that maybe was the intent,
right?
But that was probably how I would have received it if I would have been the patient, or if it would have been my parent or my loved one.
Right.
I'm like, what do you mean we can't come to our doctor? Or we can't come, you know? So that was COVID was eye opening on a lot of fronts for me, because these situations, which can be talked about on television by, you know, a political figure or a media figure, have real consequences to real everyday people.
Yeah.
And, you know, these people don't have a strong opinion about politics, so they want to live.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care if masks work, they wear them.
Right.
they just want to get the treatment they need so that they can live their lives. And there was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of suffering, unfortunately, because of decisions that were made. And, you know, we can't go backwards. But I hope that we have learned from that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not entirely optimistic about individuals, but I think as a system, hopefully we've learned that we cannot forsake certain individuals to rush to this scenario, especially with so little real information about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people who we have a plan for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have a treatment plan for them, and it might be working.
Right.
Now it's not working because they can't come. So that was terrible. That part of it was terrible.
I mean, I guess, was there any time over the last 9.5 years where you thought that we were not going to make it?
No.
You
know, the only way to not make it in something like this is to quit, is to just give up,
mm-hmm.
right? And, you know, the business model itself, we produce a quantity that the demand is so high that the fundamental economics of the business are secure forever, right? You know, clear and transparent communication, you know, individualized treatment, and wanted to be treated like a human being and not a number. I could go on and on, but we could stop right there. Just being able to provide that secures the marketplace, right? The marketplace of people who want that,
mm-hmm.
or want that for their families is enormous, right? So there's no real shortage of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges of delivering that with all of these other competing variables and market forces, I mean, that becomes complex. But at no point did I ever think that there wasn't hope, or that we couldn't get through. We can't be in a business that supplies hope and provides hope and then have none ourselves,
mm-hmm.
right? We have got to, at our core, have hope that, okay, things are challenging right now. Things are very difficult right now. Things aren't looking good right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've been down this road before, but we've been down this road before,
mm-hmm.
right? We will get over this. This too shall pass. Let's keep moving forward. Let's just keep focused on forward, right? Because there's a really good chance we're overreacting. Really good one.
Like with COVID.
There's a really good chance we're overreacting. And even if we're not overreacting, we probably still have the tools to get through it. Yeah. So if we keep that in mind, then no scenario, in my opinion, that we've encountered over the last 9 years has been bigger than that very simple reasoning.
Yeah.
You know, this too shall pass. And even if it doesn't, we'll probably still be all right. If you have that mindset, you always have hope, right? Yeah. Like it's very easy for me to be hopeful and focused, because this too shall pass. And even if it doesn't, we probably will still be okay.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there were so many times that I could point to before COVID that were really tough, that
mm-hmm.
most
mm-hmm.
people would think it's over, there's no way to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
But I never once thought that we were going to fail.
Right.
Like never. During COVID, I had some questions in early 2021.
Yeah.
And
that was a difficult time.
But I still I mean, we still
Right.
didn't quit,
Yeah.
obviously,
Right.
but it
Yeah.
was like, oh, it's so painful because I was dealing with East
This.
Ivy here
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
All the crazy brides that
Right.
wanted their.
Right.
I gave everybody the refund that
Mhm.
that we had, but they were still mad that they didn't get their wedding date. So crazy brides plus hospital in Mexico. And people don't realize too, when you own a hospital and you're giving healthcare, you still have to have buy-in from all of your team. And they were dealing with the trauma of
Right.
COVID.
Right.
And so it was like, we sat them down and said, look, I understand everybody here might have a different view.
Right.
We'll, have everybody wear their masks and do, it's a hospital. We do COVID testing.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to be here, got to go.
Right.
Like we can't do this.
Yeah.
And, thankfully we have incredible staff.
Yes.
They were a little afraid at first.
Yes.
Understandable. But we had to put some critical thinking there as well. Like they were, the logic was off on some of this stuff too. Just like, wow. But overall, they did a great job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they came through as a team, and we all came through. Really.
Yeah. Every year. Yeah.
I think that our organization is much stronger now after everything we went through with COVID. The employees got to learn they could trust us to not just lay them off and send them high and dry.
Or just, yeah. There was, I think internally, especially for those teammates that had been with us, since the beginning or the earlier years when we bought the hospital, going through the COVID experience with us, not as if we hadn't had our own roller coaster, but COVID allowed them to see that, we were probably as owners more selfless than selfish in this situation.
Yep.
Because the easier thing to do would have been to be selfish. The right thing to do was the hard thing that we ran towards.
Yep.
And there was a lot of pain. It was painful. And almost every physically painful, emotionally, financially painful. It was spiritually painful. It was painful. And that was 100% the right way to handle it.
Yep.
We're better for it. We've got a better business for it. And that's an example of you got to run to the hard thing.
Yep.
We were presented with 2 ways to do this.
Yep.
And we did the hard way because we believed that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And as painful as it was, and it was truly painful, it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are better for it.
Absolutely.
And I can only speculate what our lives would be like if we had not done the hard thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know that we would be better for it right now. I don't believe that we would be. We wouldn't be bad. We're still good people. But I don't know if we had said, you know what, let's just wash our hands with this whole thing. And this is too stressful. Like, let's just get out of the hospital. I don't believe there's no CPI. There's no stem cell. None of that stuff happens.
Right.
All the people that are being impacted now, the new vision of TAM, none of that stuff happens. The team that we have now that get a chance to experience this environment and translation, none of that happens. None of the people that are going to be impacted.
No,
none of it happens.
We had, what's interesting, I think it was a $14.9 million offer on the table.
Could have walked away right
Could
there.
have walked away right there. And we said no.
Yep.
It really wasn't, none of us wanted to give it up.
No, not right there.
And we knew that the vision was bigger than any of that. That was the easy way out, especially during COVID.
Yeah.
Stressful times.
Man,
it was
it'd
like,
been great to
we
have
definitely talked about it.
Several million more dollars in my pocket at that moment. That short-term thinking.
Yeah.
It would have been great.
Yeah.
But in the big picture, that
so
wasn't
small.
it. Yeah.
Compared to the impact that we can create. And I mean, what we're doing now is, much, much bigger. At what point did you know the stem cells was going to be very successful for our business?
Okay, so, pretty early on, I had been tracking, when we first got into the stem cell thing, I tried to educate myself and I used Dr. Neil Reardon as my reference point. He was like the most respected guy that was out there. And, my thinking is, okay, we want some sort of benchmark of the innovation. And if we can't produce and get results like Dr. Neil Reardon would do or could do in his operation, then maybe stem cells isn't the right business for us to be in or the right institute for our hospital. And what we began to see anecdotally with those initial patients was, pretty rapid response. I've never had a doubt or question our ability to source patients or do that part of the business. That actually is not something I take for granted, but it is something that if I were to take any part of the business for granted, it would be that.
Yeah.
So that it was the delivery of making sure that we can sustainably produce the cells. The moment that I saw that we could consistently produce a certain number of cells. And I remember when we first did that differentiation test, I remember when we first started getting, when a lot of the kind of like nuts and bolts of the cell production came into place, I knew we had something because those initial patients did well. Right. And these are like friends and family. These are people I know. So it's like, okay, I know you're not just bullshitting with me because we're friends. Like if this really wasn't working, say something now.
Well, and that's, that's what we did. So the first year that we did stem cells, it was all friends and family. And we did it at pretty much cost and said, let's work out the kinks. Let's figure out what systems we do, how long the treatment is, all the other treatments we're going to do with it. And and guys, if the service isn't up to the level that we want everybody in the public,
we won't do it.
Yeah. It's like, let's try the sucker out. And we did. Yeah. And it worked really well.
It worked. And it is working and it's still working. Yeah. And I think it serves as like a platform for future innovation. I think the approach that we take or took at that time, kind of proof of concept, this very small cohort group, very safe protocol, very limited, allowed us to observe the effectiveness or perhaps lack thereof of the cells. And when we saw across, different indications, different people, fairly standardized response with tissue regeneration and, reduced pain and inflammation, I knew we had something. The next step is, can we consistently produce the cells to deliver this treatment over and over and over again? Because it's not like you just go to a store or go to a pharmacy and buy them.
Right.
They have to be grown. They have to be cultivated.
Yep.
And that is done under very, very rigorous and strict environment that also has to be supported through a whole supply chain. So my doubts about the or any concerns I had about the effectiveness of stem cells were dissipated pretty much immediately. My ability or our ability to get patients, I knew was there. The question mark for me was, this is going to work. Are we going to be able to even have enough cells over the long haul to get it to people? Yes. There's a huge market for this. Everybody wants it. I mean, this is before Joe Rogan. This is before any of this stuff. I knew that this business would be really successful because there's so many people in back pain and hip pain. And I already knew that there's a huge market for it. Can we keep making the cells at a very high quality and do it in the best in class way, period?
Right.
And that's what we've done. We've actually developed the system to develop the cells.
Yeah.
That go into the treatment and along with all the other therapies that we're doing with patients. So,
a little over 5 billion cells a week.
Yeah.
That we're making now, and with our new lab,
we can escalate that.
Go up to 30.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's been kind of a rocket ship, especially the last 2 years. August 2022 is when it really took off. What have you seen that has surprised you since we started CPI?
So since we started CPI, the thing that has surprised me is not. So I didn't know how prevalent things like degenerative disc. I mean, I know they exist, right? But we've been so focused on cancer, you don't really think about. You kind of think in that lane a lot, and it was a different type of disease or indication to kind of educate myself about. And what was surprising about it was how prevalent certain low-hanging fruit perhaps for stem cell really were like tinnitus, degenerative disc. I mean, these are things that affect numerically so many more people than cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the treatment can be non-invasive, safe, very little, if any, side effects whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
that was a shock to me, because in the cancer space, I have been so used to kind of like this wrestling match of effectiveness versus toxicity,
Mm-hmm.
right? That exists when new drugs are being developed. You know, it seems like some of the best ones also have some of the wildest side effects.
Right.
And it's like, how can stem cells be so effective and not have any real side effects? Like,
Right.
come on, what is it? You pulling my leg? Like, come on. That's what was so surprising about it, is like, as I learned more about this, there's really no downside, right? And there's an ocean of people that can really benefit from it, without having to do a terribly invasive procedure or anything like that.
What I will clarify, there is no downside that severe downside that we've seen so far.
Right, that we've seen so far, correct.
The side effects for how many treatments that we're doing have been minimal. Biggest risk on the disc is infection.
Yeah.
And we have seen 2 infections.
Yeah.
It's been over a year and a half since I
Right.
think we've seen one.
Right.
But you know, so I like to just be straight with those numbers. Like in medicine, when we go over these numbers with the scientists, they're like, oh, so basically,
no, we do take. You know, sometimes it's like we have these conversations with scientists and doctors, and because I mean they're thinking about the total number of discs treated versus the total number of adverse events. No, this is not statistically significant. It might as well not even happen.
Right.
But we do have to be mindful that when we're having these conversations in the public space, that, hey, there is some risk, but it wouldn't be a risk that would be so far outside the scope that you would get doing any surgical procedure or any type of anything that involves some fine aspirated needle going into your body, right? So,
what is a bigger risk, surgery or a disc?
Exactly.
It's
Exactly. It's not. Yeah, so
not even close.
It that risk profile goes way down when we're talking about stem cells, regardless of what the indication is at our center. Compared to the alternative that many patients have. And this was a big aha learning for me as well, is there's kind of like a same type of cultural environment surrounding orthopedic surgery that exists with chemotherapy, right? Like you have these techniques that were developed decades ago. Many of them are effective. Some of them are not effective. I think orthopedic surgery isn't as lopsided and effective as, but the procedure itself, when I've talked to people who've had it, any type of orthopedic, any type of back surgery, if I could summarize a common denominator saying is I'm not the same.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of that.
You know what I'm saying? Like if I could just kind of generalize what people are saying to me at the dinners and when we're talking to people, it's just, I had this surgery. I'm just not the same.
Yeah.
Right. And not in a good way.
Right.
right. But that's what they want though. That's what stem cells gives you an opportunity to not be the same in a positive way, to change and get back to a pre-injured state or pre-degenerative state in a way that perhaps surgery does not. And I haven't heard anyone say that, man, I got the stem cells, I'm just not the same.
Right.
I just have not heard. Not to say that there's not anybody saying that, but I haven't heard anything remotely like that. So
well, what's wild is there's some weeks, because we have currently, up until last week, 15 returning patients a week. Now we're at 25.
Right.
We've been in the new location. Some weeks when we have our doctors meetings and go over, it's 15 out of 15 that got better. Yeah. It's incredible. And I mean, it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah.
We're working on this paper right now. And so, for this paper that we're doing, we had to take all lumbar procedures. And if anybody got a secondary injection, we couldn't add them to the study. And it's like, whittle it down to exactly 30 patients out of thousands. And so this is why papers are so hard to publish like they want them published.
Right.
But out of those patients, and we're going to be publishing this, and one of the scientists was coming up saying, I don't think we should include these patients because they didn't stick to the follow-up like they were told. But if we just included that would make 26 patients. all of them got better.
Yeah.
And the 4 that didn't get better got to working out too soon or didn't follow the protocol, and they hurt themselves afterwards. But I'm like, we have to include those because we can't have 100%.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, we got to show.
It's important to note that what didn't work, right? That there's a chance that it couldn't work for any reason.
Absolutely.
And that if, in the patient follow-up, there was instances of noncompliance, it's important to note that well.
Yes.
So excluding them, that doesn't give me the full picture.
Right. And so I want to, it just shows you too how good the shit works.
Yeah,
I mean,
wild.
the idea that those that actually stayed on the protocol 100% got better, that's wild. Now, only 26 patients, super small. And we definitely have seen patients that have not got better after the disc injection. No doubt about it. But that does show you, like, some weeks it's 15 out of 15 that got better.
Right.
And it's like, what in the world? This is, you can't find that anywhere.
Right. Nowhere.
And I would say the average is 80%, man. 80%. It's insane. So, we have to focus on getting this FDA approved one day. We would be doing society an injustice.
Huge solid.
For not.
Everybody who's got back pain, every military veteran has carried packs of gear on their head, their neck, their shoulders. Yeah. Defending our country. This should be something that you should be able to go to the VA hospital and get.
Yes.
And that's it. And it's
standard of care.
Right. That'd be
keep you off the pain medications, keep you out of the surgery.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those that has like a huge, this disrupts multiple standards of care.
Yes.
And in a positive way. Yeah. In a really beneficial way. And, we owe it to people to make something like this as available as possible. And that's going to take some heavy lifting across different platforms, scientifically, perhaps even politically. Yeah. But, it's worth it.
Yes.
Right. Especially when I have sat at dinner next to patients who are in such severe pain that they are actively contemplating suicide.
Yes.
Right. And that's just a hell of a thing to say to a stranger, a complete stranger at a dinner.
Yes.
Right. It's like, oh, okay, so how'd you hear about this? Well, I heard about this on Joe Rogan. To be honest with you, buddy, if this doesn't work, I'm probably going to kill myself.
Yeah.
Like, more than once have heard that type of story where people are in that type of pain. And, when we look at, populations of people who are at high risk for suicide, and we look at, what characteristics, what type of occupations have they had, do they have any of the pain management kind of plays into some of these populations of people when studies are had. Do we notice any trends or any data on people who've had or been diagnosed with degenerative disc or certain chronic pain diseases and suicide? Is there a correlation between these things? Is there a correlation between people who are using opiate management for pain and suicide? I think we know the answer to that question. This starts to disrupt
the whole thing.
You know what I'm saying? We could be significantly impacting suicide rates.
Yeah.
By this, right? And not claiming that that's our intention, but that could be an outcome.
Of course, that would be one of our intentions.
Yeah,
that would be
a great outcome of this, all of this.
Of course. So. It's unbelievable, man. Like we saw, I was a believer because I saw people getting better, but when I saw Scott's scan.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That was.
Yeah, once you start seeing the MRI.
It's like, what in the world just happened?
Right.
And, and for people that do the disc injections, actually MRI is not for the FDA something that they make you have, because some people don't, and this is across the board with disc issues. Some people don't get any improvement in MRI and they're completely better.
Right. Yeah,
and
that's true.
I forget the percentage of people that do MRIs and somebody has a herniated disc somewhere. Like it's like a lot. If you were to scan every disc, you're going to find them on people. But the actual disc injection, we have seen just horrible herniations get 100% better, like
Yeah.
no herniation.
Yeah.
Scott was one
Amazing.
crazy example. He was you remember going to dinner with Scott.
His back was jacked up.
He was
walking
stretching
around.
constantly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And now he's kite surfing, and he's in better shape than both of us now.
Yeah.
He's working out like every day.
Yeah. He looks great.
Doesn't miss.
You know, he's an amazing case, but he's not typical.
Right.
I mean, he's not atypical to what we see. Very active, very active person, has historically been a very, very active person. Got a bad back from doing jujitsu and kiteboarding and doing all this other stuff. And, he comes and does stem cells, and now all of a sudden he feels great. And and that's demonstrably seen on side-by-side MRIs, right? Now, we know that that's not really the standard that's needed for publication, but it is very, very telling to make the case on why did the stem cells work, right? Yeah. Like why? And then there's the other secondary anti-aging effects, right? People are coming in because of their shoulder or their back or their hip or whatever, not realizing that our body is interconnected and that the stem cells could be positively impacting another part of their body, which is relieving
heart, lungs,
gut, everything. Yeah. So, it's amazing. What's interesting about this, we kind of like, the gold prospectors that find gold early in the prospecting phase, that is typically a sign that there's more gold, right? And, in the fog of innovation, we have a sound and a signal that this is the general direction that we should be going with cellular development. And the more we innovate, the broader that pool of people who can benefit from it. And, just shout out to other centers that are doing different types of research with stem cells, eye disease, Alzheimer's. These, thus far, our focus has been on musculoskeletal, but I think that grows with the expansion that we have in our laboratory and in our clinical spaces. This is huge.
Yeah.
Just think of the people who came for their back, and then all of a sudden it's like other stuff start feeling better.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look like Laura's dad. He got he had 2 heart attacks.
Yeah,
he did stem cells last December. We did a echocardiogram or an EKG. He got the left side of his heart back pumping again.
Wow.
I mean, he now has movement in that heart.
Wow,
that's incredible.
Wow.
And we've seen a lot of people with heart issues, and this was just. We don't make any promises or anything. We don't know.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's amazed me. Every month we see somebody with a heart condition come in and their heart is much better than it was when they first came in.
Yeah. There's so much unexplored territory with this.
Gosh.
The challenge for us is going to be like focusing. Right. Because there's so many things and so many pathways that could benefit from this. How do we distill and drill down into what's going to have the highest impact? Not forsaking other things, but there's only so many hours in the day, right?
Yeah.
Like there's only so many. I would love to just sprinkle stem cells everywhere and see what they could do, but it doesn't work that way.
Well, I mean, once the lab gets done,
yes,
I will be moving my focus to that.
Yeah,
it's going to be, I'll be laser focused here in a few months once this lab is done. Because we got to get this one done. We've got to get our lab developed tests done. Yeah. We got to get Jocelyn, her cancer vaccines that she's making done. But within that, we're going to have a focus of what we're doing with the stem cells and how we really move that forward. Moving into more of the cancer side. So, we were CHIPSA Hospital, the original Gerson Hospital.
Yes.
Very proud of the history of the hospital.
Yes.
1996, Coley's toxins was brought in from the German doctor. Who's our German doctor?
Issels.
Sorry. The German doctor, Joseph Issels, brain fart there. And he was a famed German oncologist, did amazing work, brought the vaccines, the cancer vaccine idea to CHIPSA, combining the Gerson diet therapy with Coley's toxins and a couple of the little peptide vaccines he was doing, tumor-lysed vaccines that he was doing. And, but, as we've evolved, we
Mhm.
purchased the hospital in 2015. We started seeing patients not get as good of a response in 2018 because all the
Mhm.
immunotherapies were coming out. They'd already done these,
Mhm. Right,
they're
right,
already
right. Yeah.
pre-treated.
Right.
COVID hits, we pivot to stem cells and building this lab.
Mhm.
We're rebranding TAM Center, which stands
Right.
for Translational
Yeah.
and Advanced Medical Center. What are you most excited about what we're doing and what
Mhm.
we're launching next year?
Okay. The thing I'm most excited about is the translational. And, you know, for our listeners and viewers, the translational is the marriage of real-time science and medicine. I believe that many people have an assumption that this already exists, and it does not.
Yeah.
In fact, it's in such small quantities, it's almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm most excited about, the fact that our team, our doctors, our scientists have even faster and ready access to real-time science, real-time data, and vice versa. Because before we embarked on this evolution into TAM, I knew about kind of like the provider side of the equation and doctors not necessarily having access to real-time science. And by the time that, a paper is published, not exactly real time, right? Given how long it takes to curate the data, and then there's the writing process, and then there's the journals and back and forth. By the time it gets to something that you can read, if you have the time to read, then it's not exactly real time. But then I became educated on the scientist perspective on this and how scientists typically do not have access to real-time clinical data. They often don't know patients, or they haven't seen patients, or they don't really understand the workflows of how care is administered. So it gives them a different sense of purpose in a translational space of how the science that they're doing, even though they're disconnected from administering care to patients, they're in a space where the data is so close, the speed is there, and they could say, wow, this is having a real impact. Right? We have brilliant scientific minds in the United States, all over the world, that probably toil away, and maybe I get a sense that they don't get to see, the impact of what they do.
Yeah.
Right? And in our center, that's not the case. You are working on things, and there's a big vision and an initiative that aligns science and research and clinical science and medicine in a way that isn't very common.
Right.
It's not non-existent. It's just not common.
Yes.
And for a center our size, it's almost unheard of.
Absolutely.
So to have it, I think the fact that we are a smaller organization makes it more potent.
Absolutely.
Because we're more agile just in general.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm excited about that. I'm actually excited to see what the outcomes are. I know with the team that we have of scientists, advisors, scientific advisors, clinicians, our relationships with our partners in Mexico, the development of bioethics boards, so that we have the appropriate guardrails around our innovation and exploration. That I can only imagine what's going to come from this.
Absolutely.
Right? I have very high expectation. And which started with just a few short years ago, very skeptical of like whether stem cells, not that they didn't work, but to the degree that they would have this big of an impact, I wouldn't have suspected that.
Yes, same. When I look at what we've created, the full hospital, all 6 stories. Actually, we added a 6th story.
Right.
Is renovated.
Yes.
Every square foot.
Oh yeah.
The lab on the 6th floor was always a dream. I wanted a lab across from our conference room.
Yeah.
So, and with the doctors and scientists on the same floor.
Yeah.
So we could go talk to them when we had questions and go in the lab and we've created the 6th floor where the doctors and scientists share workspace. And then the lab is all glass and you can see through and go work, and it's, you have to have special access to get in there, of course. But it's all glass too. So it's very, very, you stand on one side of the building, you can see all the way to the ocean. Yeah. Because it's glass. And it's a very collaborative type workspace that really hasn't been done before. And if you look at what we've combined, like we just got the deal with Roche, one of the biggest pharmaceutical diagnostic companies, actually the best diagnostic company in the world. Roche is by far the best. We're going to be their reference lab. We have all Roche equipment. Digital pathology will also be Roche. Full optical genome mapping, next generation sequencing, flow cytometry, cellular manufacturing, 4 separate rooms for cellular manufacturing. It's incredible that we have all of it under one roof.
It's amazing.
Creating the LIMS and bioinformatics system where we can get all that information into one. It's been a big pull, Deddrick.
It is.
It's been a big pull.
We're here though.
Yeah, we're here.
We are here. The lab and the expansion of scope and capacity is, we were talking briefly before we started recording about the task force and getting the team ready for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
There's this, expansion of material scale, which okay, great. We've got more square footage. We got more room to have chairs and beds. And that's a fairly easy to discern type of expansion or scaling. The expansion of scope is so mind-blowing. What we can do, the bigness of that and the impact that it can have is far beyond what we have done.
Right.
That we are in a preparatory season with the team, with our managers, with our leaders, all the way down to the cleaning staff. This is a new paradigm.
Yeah.
You are going to be asked to carry a different vision, a different scope, a different type of thing. And we want to give you the tools now because, when the rocket takes off, and you might think that the rocket has already taken off. It has not. It has not. No. When this happens, you got to be prepared.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe in the past, we've moved so quickly that we haven't stopped and said, hey, all right, let's retool, let's get this. But our team has been so agile and versatile, they can adapt quickly.
Right.
We see this time with the completion of the hospital renovation as ideal. Like, hey, when this grand reopening happens, we are entering into a new season, a new place, a new space. And you want to come into it with all of the good, eat the meat, throw away the bone, and a new set of tools to accommodate this expansion of scope.
Right.
Is much bigger. This is the equivalent of, in that one laboratory, building 10 more hospitals, right? Like that material scaling is big, and having 10 more hospitals, if we had 10 extra square footage, that would have been just amazing. The scope is that big or bigger.
Absolutely.
Or bigger. Without having to build 10 hospitals, it's that big or bigger.
Yep.
And people have to be mentally, emotionally, professionally prepared for that.
Yeah.
Right. And have some tools to be able to handle and operate at a higher level, because we're stepping into another realm of innovation.
Yeah.
There's going to be a different type of support and criticism. There are going to be different types of patients with different concerns. And we just need to be on top of this. And the team has to have a certain level of understanding going into this, that, wow, understand the bigness that we are in right now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. It's not just a change in the company. It is a new company.
It is. And think about how strategic everything that we've done is.
Oh, of course.
I mean, if you look at when you walk in on the first floor, to the left is a ISO 7 lab. It could turn into an ISO 7 lab. We're going to be using it for research with 3 hoods, big hoods, glass where you can see the people in the lab working. We knocked out a bunch of different beams in the front lobby and opened it all up, and have glass going into the CT room that you hit a button and it fogs. But the CT and the room behind it are both interventional radiology suites, which we're going to be interventional radiology is going to be a key aspect of what we do.
Yep.
We have 2 interventional radiology suites. On the second floor, we've rebuilt the surgery area, made the recovery area bigger, but we built a full ICU.
Yes.
So now we'll have full ICU capabilities. Before we had an ICU, but it wasn't built out to we weren't seeing ICU patients.
Right. Yeah, of course.
But
now we have that capacity.
Now we have a licensed ICU.
Mm-hmm.
The 6th floor, I mean, it's incredible what that lab can do, and the speed at which we can get results for patients, genomic results, next generation sequencing results that normally would take 4 to 6 weeks, we can do in 48 to 72 hours.
Yeah.
And just blasting through it. With the cellular treatments, having somebody like Jocelyn, who's a rock star, in making these cellular treatments, one of our big focuses is lowering the cost to make these treatments.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You look at like CAR T cells, $600,000 to $1 million. Well, it costs a lot for them to make it. It really does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our goal is to get it to patients for under $50,000.
Yeah.
And, so how do we solve those problems? Well, we look to make our own reagents. We look to create our own ways of developing products in-house that lower the cost across the board. And we can do it because we're all vertically integrated.
Yes. Yeah.
The cost to run a clinical trial. I mean, so, the CROs charge between $50,000 to $100,000 per patient.
Wow.
We have our own CRO.
Yeah.
I mean, we have everything that we need, and that hasn't been done before. And add to it that we have doctors working with scientists.
Right.
That doesn't happen at all.
People take that for granted.
Yeah, it's like, man.
They think they're doctors working with
we got all these PhDs. We have our PhD students. We have a PhD program as well. We have almost 30 doctors, and all that brain power is going to be on that floor.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out the best treatment and diagnostics for patients. And it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in a wonderful space. We did the hard thing, and we're in a good spot now. And we're about to do a series of hard things to expand the scope of this, because we can talk about this, but it hasn't been done yet.
No.
And by us or anyone. So in doing it or even attempting it, there's going to be new challenges that come with it. There's the unknown unknowns, right? Carl, right? So being prepared for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going back to preparation for at least the known unknowns, right? Because there's going to be some unknown unknowns. Being prepared as best we can as a team, leadership, everybody kind of being on board to set really appropriate expectations with the patients. You mentioned vertical integration, and, I think what we don't pat ourselves on the back enough for, we innovate a lot in market-facing therapies and technologies, but we also innovate a lot in our supply chain because we've had to make things work.
We have a full distribution company in Mexico.
We had to
people
make
don't
it
even
work.
know about.
Man, we had to make that whole thing work because it hasn't been easy. We had to do the hard thing.
Well, we're offered accounts from Big Pharma to run their distribution in all of Mexico, and we turn it down. By the way, we're just like, we don't have time for this shit.
Yeah, right.
But we're not distributors. But that's that's what we've set up the ability to do that, and they want us to.
Yeah.
What about the documentary we have coming up?
Okay. The documentary is exciting. Filming something for that long. First of all, I've never filmed or been filmed doing anything ever, right? I've never been in a movie or commercial or anything. So, just understanding the process of how a documentary film is made has been fascinating to me. Working with Nick Knight and his team, those guys are our friends now. Like Carlo, all the guys are good. I'm excited about it because it almost takes a professional storyteller to wrap what has happened to us over the last 9 years into something that other people could understand, right? Because that could have easily been a a 3-year television series, right? Of B-roll of all of the ups and downs that are associated with it. But I'm excited that it does give the world an opportunity to see who we are, what our mission has been and is to be, the impact that we're trying to make and are making in this world. And if legacy matters at all, then the story behind legacy is something that is often not told, right? A lot of times we see the statue, we see the tall building, but we don't see what went on to erect that structure or that statue. That's the legacy, is what's left on. Well, in this film, you get a chance to see what goes on to build this legacy, right? And that's, if you're a legacy-minded person, that's important because it didn't happen overnight.
Right.
It wasn't easy. It was a lot of challenge and struggle. And, because we're focused on other things, who's going to chronicle that? Right? They're just going to see the outcome and say, oh, wow, TAM. And that, look at, this is great. But not really see the whole process that led up to this. Yeah. So the documentary will hopefully express that. This is not something, we're not a flash in the pan hospital organization. We have been through things that most other organizations haven't even had to think about at all. And we've prevailed. And this film will highlight through the periodic and long, I mean, what was it, 7 years of filming?
7 years.
Yeah, 7 years of filming. The evolution that we have gone through in our vision, the successes, the failures, how do we deal with certain things? And I think that gives people a good context or a good look into this. And if they're looking at the TAM brand or the CPI brand, and if they are like me and they're very values focused, hopefully they'll be able to look at that documentary and say, these are the people behind the brand that I want to support or be in support of. So, yeah,
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I think that Nick did a great job telling the story. About it's about 90 minutes long, hour and 30 minutes, and to pack 7 hours or 7 years rather in an hour and 30 minutes. I mean, it's like, how do you do that? Maybe,
right.
Maybe one day they got to make it into a longer deal. But
Right.
He did a great job.
Yes.
And it looks like that we're going to be getting into Sundance, which would be awesome.
Yeah. I'm so ready to just hit different film festivals. I'm ready to do it all. So
let's do it, man.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say before you?
Man, I can't express how grateful I am for you.
Oh, thanks, man.
You've been a good friend since I met you.
Yeah.
And you're a good person.
Thanks, man.
I love you.
I love you too, but I get teary even saying that, man.
I love you, man.
But we've been through a lot, man, and it's there's a very few people that you have in your life that you could trust 110%, and that you kind of like enjoy going to battle with. And not that we like to battle, but if you do got to go to battle, you're one of those guys. So I love you too, brother.
Right on, man.
All right, great podcast.
Yeah.